Yeah. Well, we'll get going here so you can spend some time with your family. But
No, all good.
um,
I'm
uh,
excited, man. No
yeah,
worries.
so am I. I'll go ahead and introduce you, Zack Threadgill. We've known each other for a while, coached against each other. Previously, the head
Yep.
football coach at Apollo High School in the Phoenix area. Was there for 13 years as a head coach. You're still there. You're just
Yes.
not coaching anymore. So thanks for coming on, man. It's been a
Thanks
while.
for having me. Excited.
I think the last time I saw you, I think you guys beat us 57-10.
I
And
didn't
I
know we were
think
gonna go there.
yeah, and
Um,
I think that changed. I think that completely changed our season and kind of the trajectory. I mean, we used it as like, listen, this isn't the old McClintock, but yeah, we had to knock that out. So thanks for doing
that was
that.
one of
I
those things
appreciate it.
where it seemed like everything went right for us. One of those
Yeah,
games where the opening script and everything kind of just fell into place. And so
yeah.
uh, it's nice when you got really good players too.
And then I think that actually the last time I probably saw you was my oldest son, Preston, graduated in 17.
Hmm.
And he went to Mesquite and they played you guys. I don't know if it was in the regular season or the playoffs.
Yeah, it was in the regular
I think
season.
it's the regular season.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
No, yeah, no,
been a while.
17. We played against your
Yeah.
son did he graduate in 17?
Yeah. So it would
It
have
would have
been
been the
16.
16 season. We played him in
Right.
16 at our place, and they beat us, and that kid was all over the field. He was all over the field. I mean, both sides of the ball, and,
Yeah.
yeah, he got us that game.
He had a great career at Weber State. So it
Yeah, I had
was
fun
a
following
great
him.
career. Yeah. Let me ask you something because I mean, we all get into it for different reasons, and just reading some things about you. When you first became a head coach, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you weren't married, correct?
Yeah,
Weren't a
single.
father.
Yeah.
Yeah. So 13 years, and kudos to you, for doing what you do yearly, to reevaluate kind of everything that was going on when you were a head coach. But give everybody a little bit of your perspective on um just that transition of becoming a head coach, then getting married and having kids, and I know it because I lived it, and it's part of the reason I got out of coaching college football. But from your perspective, what changed the most for you from the time you became a head coach to the time you retired as a head coach, if you will?
Well, that's a great question. Uh, I guess my time availability probably
Yeah,
changed the most. But, when I was real fortunate with timing and, I got done playing in college and was an assistant for 2 years and interviewed for the job when it opened really for experience. I knew I wanted to be a head coach, but I don't know if I was ready. I was 26.
yeah,
And the next thing I know, they said, "You're hired." I said, "Okay, what next?" And so at that point, I'm young. My brother's living with me. My younger brother, Steven, and he's got to be 23 years old. And we said, let's go do this. And so at that point, we're living, we're single, and we're just
yeah.
really married to our job at that point. We're fresh new teachers at Apollo High School, very high energy guys. We went so to be able to take the job at that point where we had really no off away from school responsibility. Um, and so we're really able to dive into that, really able to dive into the relationships and really able to uh, just have a great experience. And so then, and that was great. And that was great to start the foundation that way. And I think
Yeah.
that as you went on and I ended up getting married, so that was 2006, and I ended up getting married in 2012 and had my twins in 2013. And so we really changed fast at that point. And
Yeah.
so um, I think that another thing that, our kids were born in August. And so right at the beginning of football season. And so that was a whole nother thing too, because they were preemies. They were in the hospital for a little while, the NICU. And so the time availability and the value of that time, the value of time really became apparent to me. And then also at that point, up to that point in my life, I was always in control, in my opinion, at least, right? Like I
Yeah.
could control my
Yeah.
schedule, I could control the team, I could control what we want to do with the calendar. all of that. And then now I was put in this situation where it really took me just to submit and say, God, I am not in control at all, at all.
Right.
And so I'm going to
Right.
just trust you. And so then at that point, moving forward, having kids and coaching was great because my wife was super supportive, has always been super supportive, but really like team mom and the girls were totally involved too. And so it was great to share that with them. And then it just kind of got to a situation where it was kind of my time wasn't able to give what I was able to give before. And I felt that even if I'm only able to give 95%, how can I stand up in front of this group of kids and say, I need you to give me 100% when I could only give you 95? And I thought that that was a good time for me to just kind of step back and kind of evaluate some priorities. And then, but it made it easier then when I got back into it.
Yeah. Right. So, because I think the reason I ask you that, Zach, is because I think there's a lot of guys, and I know I struggled with it as a young father and young husband, for the first 3 or 4 years that I was coaching. First 4 years, it was just me and my ex wife at the time, and once we had Preston, our first, my whole perspective changed. And at that level, I mean, you're working 16, 18-hour days, 20-hour days during the season, and you're working 7 days a week, for 7 months out of the year, and you're on the road for another 3 months. And, but my perspective, kind of went from, all about me to the greatest thing in the world just happened to me.
Right.
And I was able to see it. And so when we went to Arkansas State and then we got the whole staff got fired, I turned down 3 jobs, Tulsa, UAB, and Eastern Michigan. Got out of it, moved back to Arizona because we had 2 kids at the time, and it was just one of those things, and it's a hard thing to do because you miss it,
Right.
right? You
Right.
miss being around, being in the it's that locker room mentality, right? Whether it's with
Oh,
the
yeah.
coaches or the
Oh,
kids
yeah.
or whatever. Um, and I think there's a lot more coaches out there that go through what we went through as far as, you know, really soul searching that. But I think there's a lot of coaches that don't make the decision to stop coaching, because they're afraid they're gonna miss it.
Right.
Um, and it is. I mean, there's different avenues to follow, and God has a path for all of us, and it's a hard decision to make. But what was that evaluation process that you were talking about, like year after year, that you went through to make sure that you were all in 100%, not 90 or 95 or 80? Um, if you don't mind sharing it. I mean, you don't have
No,
to get too in depth.
I think it's critically important that coaches, and not just head coaches, but all coaches evaluate themselves at the end of the year and evaluate, what went well, what went wrong. More importantly, moving forward, do I have what it takes? Am I still have that same juice? Am I still have what it takes to do this for the whole year, not just for a couple months, and to bring that energy every day? And, it's something new every day. And so I would look back at that. I would talk with my wife, check in with her, how she's feeling about it. And she's, like I said, always super supportive. So for me, it just came time to just the first couple of years after kids was like, yeah, I still got this. We're in a good spot right now. I felt like I settled into a good routine. And then just that final year. I never was in the middle of my last season thinking this is my last season.
Right, right, right.
I never treated it like that. I never, and I did that throughout my entire career being a head coach. I didn't ever wanted to look in week 7 and say, man, I don't think I'm going to do this anymore. That was unfair to anybody involved. And
Mhm.
so I stayed true to that. And then those first couple weeks afterwards and really Christmas break is when I just really realized, I'm giving a lot of my time to this. And I think that it's time to take a step back and
Yeah.
invest my time in some other places.
Good for you. That's a big move, and I'm proud of you, and it's a hard thing to do.
It
Harder than
is.
most
It
people think.
is because it doesn't leave you. You know it doesn't. You
Yeah,
still
yeah.
go watch a game, and now you're looking at what would you do here? What would you do there? How did that happen? I love it, man.
Yeah.
I think that's always going to be in.
Before I forget, because it just popped in my mind, but you know about the MTTS sports group, right?
Hmm.
I've created a nonprofit. I've just been doing that the last 2 months, so
Okay.
we need to have another discussion, some other time, get on the phone and talk about that because
I'd love
I
to.
think you're gonna love it, and I'd love to have
We
you
spoke
involved in all
briefly about that before. I want to follow up for sure.
Yeah, here's a question I have for you because I always tried to do this. When you were a head coach, when you hired assistant coaches, I don't care what level, I mean, you took the same approach as I took as it didn't matter if you were a freshman coach or a coordinator, an assistant, it didn't matter because you were all one staff, right? It didn't matter what
Hmm.
level, didn't matter what your title was. When you hired new coaches and that had families of their own or were married, without kids, married with kids, did you what was your approach to them in regards to their family? Would you, want to meet the wife and the kids? Did you guys, was it important for you to really make sure that the time that it took to coach at the high school level was understood and could be committed to and stuff like that?
I made that a big priority, especially early on, of explaining what the time commitment was going to look like, and talking about their current schedule and how Apollo football or how football is going to fit into that schedule.
Right.
And some of those conversations ended with us saying, this isn't going to work out.
Yeah.
And some of them ended with us saying, we need to, this is going to work and we can make this work. And so, um, there's no way to like beat around the bush about that. There's some things that just, especially during the season, take some time. And,
Yeah.
and the families really sacrificed a lot for us to be able to do that. And so just making sure I remind them to communicate with their wives or girlfriends, especially young coaches. And I was one of them, but when see those young 20 coaches coming in, married and girlfriends, reminding them, hey man, like make sure your priorities are in order. Make sure you know,
Right.
and if you ever get in a sense that it's not, having a conversation with that coach off to the side, or tell him, "Hey, man, get out of here." You know what I mean? Maybe you don't need to be here on this Saturday. Why don't you go take a day? And so, and I was also trying to be very understanding of that as well, because all coaches' search situations are different, especially some are on campus, some are off campus. Um, and so the working schedule, the timelines, having guys who own their own business, having guys that work for the fire department, the schedules are
Right.
changing.
Right.
So just trying to be as understanding as possible and accommodating as possible, um, to those
Did
guys.
you with your weekly in season schedule because for coaches, because I know everybody's different, we know guys that have done do things completely different and everybody does it kind of their own way. How did you have it set up? Would you guys come in on Saturdays and pretty much work the whole day, try and get 85% of the game plan done and then give them Sunday off? Would you leave it up to your coordinators to kind of decide about the weekend? How did you set that up?
We met on Saturday mornings, and again, I think that was the result of me just wanting to do what worked for me.
Yeah,
And so we would meet Saturday mornings, try to get as much as we could done watching our film. And I've done it where we bring the kids in, where we didn't bring the kids in. With the advancement of huddle, there's a lot of stuff you can do
right.
where you don't necessarily all have to be in the same room. And so, but
Yeah,
huddle really didn't come into my tenure until the end. When I first started,
yeah.
we were doing VHS,
Uh-huh.
and I got back, and um, so we would come in Saturdays, work, try to get as much as we could done, and then a follow up with coordinators over the weekend. I was doing some coordinating early, and then when my brother took over as my offensive coordinator, and I had Sam Jacobs as my defensive coordinator, who
Yeah,
just
yeah,
stepped down from Sunny Slope, and so
yeah,
that was the perfect marriage really, because I had two guys in the roles that were really fit well with this just personality scheme. We worked so well together. And so when we had them, it seemed like our weekends were a lot less. There
yeah,
was a lot more trust in those guys where we'd still get our work done. But then we would just have communication. My brother and I, again, living together, living by each other, being able to meet up whenever we needed to. And then Sam, we were just always in communication. So I
Yeah.
think the responsibility was a little less there. I mean, now um, meeting on Sundays. Some teams do that, but got to get in there, I think, and meet with those guys and
Yeah,
watch
absolutely.
your film and explain the plan so everybody's on the same page. That's just so critically important. That first practice and through every practice, but making
Yeah.
sure everybody's aligned. So Saturdays
It
is
wa
what we would do. Try not to overkill it.
Right. Well, and it helps, like you said. I mean, there was a couple years there at McClintock where the offensive coordinator was Anthony Figueroa, who's the head coach at Marcos now, and the defensive
Doing
coordinator
a good
was
job.
Sammy Johns,
Oh
who's
gosh.
been so those were my coordinators, and you want to talk about that was the best staff I've ever been on because it was important to everybody. We all held the same standards. We'd hold each other accountable, and guys got their stuff done,
Yeah.
and the communication was unbelievable. And you're fortunate that you experienced it too with your brother and with Sam. And it's a rare thing, though, I think.
Right. But it's
Especially at
special
schools that
too.
like
You meet it. I mean, the
yeah,
communication, you could just pick something up where you're talking about clip 34 or clip 82 and how are
mhm,
we going to do this against this motion and what are we going to and sometimes those conversations literally last like a minute, maybe a minute 15 seconds, right? And then maybe it's
right,
hey, I want to get this plan in the script or it just that fluid communication and it seems like when we were most successful as a team as our communication
right,
was that, right? Was
yep.
was was fluid, not just between coaches, between kids, between everybody. And so, yeah.
Well, good. I Before I get into, leadership, and I wanna talk about your 6 rules that you had, and community and stuff like that. I wanna, because we had a pretty lengthy conversation. I think you were on the beach somewhere. Were you in
We were
Mexico?
in yes.
You in Mexico.
We were in
Yeah,
Cancun for spring break, yes.
yeah, so,
It was awesome.
I appreciate your time, but we spent some time talking about, having being a coach and the importance of mentoring other young coaches. I know, and I've said many times who my mentors were, both in college, as a head coach, as a high school coach. There's been a multitude of guys. Um, who were a couple of yours? Why were they important to you? And why
Wow.
is that conversation that you and I had about you wanting to really, help other young coaches, not make the same mistakes that we made, or
Right,
just,
right.
be the best version of a head coach and man that they can be.
I'm really intrigued by that, helping young
Yeah,
coaches. And,
yeah,
for me, when I was that guy, Kelly Moore was a guy that really helped me, he reached out to me. He's been a friend and just to be able to have someone to talk to, ask a random question and not feel bad about it, just a comfortability there with him. He was great. Really appreciated Kelly. And then I'll tell you what, after my first year coaching football as a head coach, Mark Nold was in. He had just won two back to back. He had won back to back state championships at Apollo. He said, "Hey, you need to come be on my staff." And I'm like, "Coach, I didn't play basketball other than at the park, and I don't really know much about that." And he just kept saying, "No, you're going to be great. It's all going to work out. You're going to be great." And so I didn't realize what he was doing at the time, but he became a major mentor for me
good,
because he was able to show me really the culture side of it. He was able to show me all of that. And so um, watching how he interacted with kids, how he established his culture, his leadership, his communication, how he dealt with people. I didn't realize it at the time when I was taking the job, how he was really teaching me how to be a coach.
yeah,
And I just so that was a huge step for me. Um, and then I was able to stay with the basketball program, which was great because now Mark left. We ended up winning the state championship. So you get to see that level of competition and how that goes. And then Mark ended up going to Perry, and
yeah,
I stayed with for the next couple coaches. And that was great because, anytime you're in a new environment, you're learning still, you're all got that energy and juice. So I got to learn a lot about that sport, coach that sport, and try to get as many wide receivers and DBs to play football as I
Right.
could.
Yep. Yep.
So,
100%.
and then, man, so many good coaches that have played a big part of my life. I've been surrounded with really, really good coaches. I mean, my dad
Yeah.
is a critical mentor for me. Vern Jacobs, Sam's dad, those guys. Just growing up at a young age, watching those guys coach and the joy and how they had their whole family involved was critically uh, like impactful and influential in my development as a person and definitely as a coach. And
Yeah.
so, um,
Why do
yeah,
you think it's because I have, not necessarily on the podcast, but I've had so many conversations with young coaches. And one of the first questions I ask them is like, who's your mentor? Or, people have reached out to me and like, leaned on me and that's, without saying it, but I ask a lot of young coaches like, who are your mentors? And they're like, I don't, well, why not? You need someone to direct you, especially as a new head football coach.
right.
Um, because you don't know what you don't know. And you need to, I mean, I'm fortunate like Dick Baniszewski, right? Bano was one of them when I got at McClintock. Max Ragsdale was
Oh
another
yeah.
one. Of course, I had Jim Jones and Preston Jones because they were my former in-laws. But there were a lot of different people, and I mean, we played Campo one time and got beat, and it was a tough, close game. And I had an issue during that game,
Mm.
and it was not something that I had previously seen or had to deal with. Um, and so I called Max, like, on my way home. I'm like, "Hey," and we had just played him. I'm like, "How do I handle
Mm.
this?" And he gave me the greatest advice on how to handle it, and I handled it that way, and, it turned out the way it should have, let's just put it that way, but, um,
Oh no.
so how important is it for you still there?
Yeah, I got me. Did I
Yeah, I
freeze?
got
I
you.
don't know what happened.
No, I don't know. How important is it for younger coaches, and why is it so important for them to have mentors?
They need because just what you said. They don't know what they don't know, and they need to not be afraid to ask a question. I think that's
Yeah,
one of the biggest mistakes young coaches make. They feel like they should know it, and they don't want to reach out to someone to ask their opinion or guidance. And the reality is, that's I would love nothing more for anybody on my staff or any coaches at any time that wanted to just talk ball. Like that's part of the community that I miss. The
right.
community of the coaches, um, the ability to help. And I just think that as a young guy, thinking that you could do it by yourself or on your own, that you're crazy and you need help. And that's just not what coach does with everything. And as men, we need to be able to ask for help sometimes. And especially if it's a head coach. It's one thing if you're just a coordinator, and I don't want to say just a coordinator, but I just want to say if my responsibility level is a coordinator versus a head coach. If you're a first time head coach, there's so many times where you are just feeling like, get me through today with my head
You're
above water.
all yeah, and you
And
feel
and
like you're alone.
T Yes, leadership is a lonely position,
Yep,
and, so to have someone that you could talk to is really valuable, and it gives you perspectives, gives you some ideas. If anything, it's just a soundboard for you to kinda try out something new, I guess, but
yeah.
you
I
need it.
had, well, my former father-in-law, who was at Red Mountain forever as a head coach, started the school, but I remember he told me when I first got hired, he's like, "A lot of what you're gonna be dealing with is not football related." And I was like,
Mhm.
"What do you mean?" He's like, and I coached for him, and I was his assistant head coach, and, he was a little bit older, so he just kinda like, "You handle it, you handle it, you handle it." But even taking on that responsibility, you don't see behind the scenes the
Right.
amount of calls, emails, administrators coming to you, teachers coming to you, parents coming to you, other students coming to you.
Correct.
There's just so much, and it's kind of like, and I've said it on here so many times it's hopefully it doesn't fall on deaf ears, but it's kind of like being a new parent, right? Like you can be a great aunt and uncle and have that experience, and you have all these people telling you what it's going to be like. But I know for me, before we had our first kid, it's like everybody was telling me what to expect. And I finally got to the point where it's like, nobody can prepare me for this. And
Right.
it would kind of irritate me. And, you know, being a first time parent, it's like no one can prepare you for that um,
I
until
think
you
that's a
actually live it.
I think it's a fabulous analogy. It really is because when you're interviewing for a head coach, young coaches, yeah, you don't know that stuff until you see it, and it's always changing. And there's no handbook on how you're gonna what you're supposed to do. And
Right.
you're going to get contacted by a lot of people, and you're going to see a lot of different issues that some have nothing to do with football at all, but they require your attention, and sometimes they require your attention right now in this moment.
Right.
And you need to be
Right.
able to manage your time appropriately, think with a clear head, not emotionally. And that's where it goes back to having a mentor and someone you could lean on in those situations,
And,
because the more you're exactly right. That probably was my biggest shock of being a head coach, is how much non-football related things I was dealing with that were very, very important.
right.
Fundraising, very
Right.
important.
Yeah. Little bit of since you said fundraising, I was going to talk about community because I'm pretty sure 90, maybe even 100% of people, when they go in for a head coaching interview for any head coaching position, doesn't have to be football, but I know I've been asked in it in every single head coaching interview I've been in is they want to know about how you're going to involve the community, right? And so I think everybody has a pretty good answer. I mean, I think every head coach understands the importance of getting the community involved. But then it falls off drastically as to where maybe 50% of head coaches actually follow through, and the other percentage they don't. But it's not because they don't understand the importance of the community, it's because they don't know how. They
Right.
don't have a system, or they don't have, you know, people to ask, how do I get my community involved? At Apollo, much like McClintock, it may look like a big community, but it's not. It's
Mhm.
very condensed in a tight race, area. And I know is super important to you. And I think that's a part of your culture that I always knew about, and probably one of the greater things that I loved about the way you did things in your football program. How did you get your community involved, to really buy into what you guys were doing as a football program?
Man, that was, a lot of that I could probably credit to the fact that that's the neighborhood I grew up in.
Yeah,
That community is the neighborhood I played at Apollo. And
yeah,
so it was never the plan to be Apollo's head football coach. But like I said, the product of good timing just kind of happened that way. And, and so, and my brother graduated from Apollo, and we had a lot of young coaches on our staff with a lot of energy.
oh,
And we just,
I lost your audio.
oh no,
Lost your
let me see what's
audio.
going on. You got
There
me
you go.
still?
You're back. Yeah, I got you. Yeah, yeah. I lost you when you said that's okay. That I lost you when you
Okay.
said go
I
ahead.
was saying that, having gone to school in that community, growing up in that community, um, helped that I already had a lot of ties, and it helped that, we could dive right back into those. And so, um, we were trying to do whatever we could. We were just walking into businesses blindly and trying to sell them a ad in our program, or if they wanted to hang a banner at the field, and trying to get involved with team dinners. And it's just, when you don't have a lot of off the field responsibilities, you could do that. And so
Right.
I would love now to see what kind of more efficient ways or more interesting ways that I could try to get that community involved, because sometimes that's a big challenge.
Yeah. We would one of our big fundraisers, it was called we changed it from cow chip bingo to chicken drop bingo when we were at McClintock because there weren't a whole lot of cows around that area.
Right.
So um But we'd have a big barbecue. We'd invite community people, you know, and the whole community. We'd go out and put flyers out, and
That's
you know, it was
awesome.
free for everybody. Well, you know, a couple years we had a firefighter, police officer, um, you know, you know, we made it up where they played flag football. They competed against each other,
Wow.
and that drew a lot of people too. But most guys that become a head coach at a high school, right? They aren't fortunate enough to really understand the demographics, socioeconomically, the type of community that they're getting involved with. You were fortunate because you grew up there and went to school there. You understand the culture. You understand the type of kids that were there. Even though I'm sure it had changed a little bit since you had been there, but um, some words of advice to coaches that are struggling with understanding the community, that go out and do all the things you said that you did, but there's still a lack of connection. Is there anything that they really need to dive into to really understand the community and make more of an impact?
Yeah, I think that that's another great question. I would we really starts in the locker room. And it really starts with the relationships with the kids and the families and knowing where that kid comes from and knowing where he's going home tonight and knowing that. And then once we have a good feel for what the locker room looks like and what our community of family looks like, what football family looks like, how does that reflect? Is it the same in the community? Does the community mirror that? And is there some connections there within our community of football within the community in which we live? And how do we make those connections? And how do we put kids in connection with the business maybe or a job opportunity? Or how do we just find a way to really, I mean, you say invest in the community. Before we invest in that community, we really need to invest in that locker room and the people that we're coaching, the kids, the families, finding out who they are and what's making them tick and understanding their current situation. And usually, like I'm saying, that's reflective of the community that you're coaching in. And so being able to help within your community any way you can, but um, that
That
That seems to be a bigger challenge, especially with social media nowadays of it's just crazy. Establishing connections is also almost becoming tougher now,
yeah.
than it was maybe before.
And you know what? And this took me a year to figure out, but when I got to McClintock, you know, everything these kids had this mindset that everything was optional, that
Mm.
you know, everything was individualized, everything was optional. If they didn't show up, they didn't show up. There was no accountability, no discipline. And the beautiful thing about that marriage when I got to McClintock is that I quickly realized that these kids wanted discipline. They wanted structure. They may not always like it, but they craved it. And I think
Mm.
that's us as a society and human beings in general. May not always like discipline, but we crave that because it offers structure. Um, but I was managing around kids having to work or kids not being able to get rides or kids showing up
Mhm.
late. And finally, after that first season, I came up with just a one pager and it was kind of a questionnaire. And I sat, you know, every single kid down in the program together and I said, here's what this is. Take your time. It's due in 2 days. But there were questions on that. Do you work? How many hours a week do you work? Do you contribute to your household's income? Meaning,
Right.
and then I had to put it, you know, explain what that meant. Who do you live with? Do you have any brothers or sisters? If you do, how old are they? What do they do for a living if they're older? And every single kid turned that in. I mean, I had to chase a couple, but it opened my eyes, and I quickly learned that at that school, 75% of our kids were working,
Mm.
okay? And about of that 75%, about 50% of that 75%, a portion of their income went to the household.
Man,
And then
wow.
on top of that, 90% of our kids came from either single parent or no parent household. You know, when I say no parent, not living on the street, but living with another family member that wasn't their
Right.
mom or their dad. Um, and I continue to do that every year, because things
That's an
changed, and
outstanding
that's
idea.
I mean, and I don't remember who told me about that, but it may have been, I remember having a conversation with Jermaine Whitaker, who was our AD and still there. And he told me, he's like, you need to learn every kid. And I know you're going to do that, but you need to speed it up and really find those buttons, in the whys.
Mhm.
Why are they late? Why are they not showing up? That kind of thing. And it made my job, not that it was ever easy, but it made it a lot more effective, you know.
Mm.
And so, but that kind of goes like what you said, goes into the community involvement and stuff like that.
Right, and you really that's right. I think that's a great thing. I think young coaches should listen to that and take that note from you because, just it goes back to what we were talking about saying earlier about just getting to know your locker room and
Yeah.
getting to know when you understand that situation, it's a little different, and kids lethargic at practice, and some coaches are just, "He's not giving good effort," and he's just, "What's wrong with that kid?" And like, "Do you know what's wrong with the kid? Have we talked to him?" And
Yeah.
as a head coach, I know, you know what I mean? And so now the conversation after practice is with the coach, not with the kid.
Right.
Okay, man,
Right.
I should have let you know this earlier. That's my fault, and not
Yeah.
being on the same page. But we got to give a little grace in this situation.
Absolutely.
And that's not true
Absolutely.
all the time, but it definitely is true sometimes.
Right. Right. All right, let me ask you about this because this will take a little bit of time. But I read where you had, and I don't know if rules is the right word, but you had 6 things that you consistently focused on with your student athletes. Um, is that right?
Do you
There
have a
were
list
6
of
of
those
them?
6? I'm trying to think what this is. I'm gonna have to
Man.
dig in the archives.
There were, hold on, I'm gonna pull it up. Yeah, there were 6 things, and I thought it was really cool, and not that you forgot about it, but I wanna ask you kinda about each one of them. Um, where is it? Where is it? Where is it? Oh, your program based on 6 rules the kids will always live up to. So standards, you can call them standards, but it was
Uh-huh.
caring, citizenship, fairness, respect,
All the
responsibility, and
pillars.
trustworthiness. Yeah, are those your pillars?
Yeah, well, I can't take credit for the pillars. I can't take credit for really leaning into them, but, I think that was like a school or a district, um, initiative, and I thought at the time that we were where we were as a program and what our district and school was pushing for, that was like, "Boom,
That's
this
what
is
they
it.
wanted, yeah.
This is great right
Alright,
here. We need to really lean into this." And
so
so,
let's
I can't
let's
take the
take
credit for coming up
well,
with those.
let's take that because I know what were 3 to 5 pillars or standards that you consistently enforced that the kids when you were coaching there that we could say, "Hey, what are the 3 to 5 standards?" Or, "What is the program centered around?" The coaches, spoke the same language on it, all the time. They had to live it. You lived it. What were 3 or 5 of those standards that for the program?
Man, I would
I know it's been
say,
a while.
the integrity piece, and I don't even know what those 6 pillars of character, I don't even know if I could say those right now.
Yeah, it's not.
But for us, the integrity was big, um, the honesty and,
No.
communication was big. And it's so funny, what were the things built on and all these things? I try to think back. And those first couple years, I don't know if I would say that we had that, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're trying to
Right,
just figure
right.
it out at that point, right? And so what are we gonna lean into and who are we gonna be? And so when we would go to camp, um, in Carlsbad, we would really have some team building sessions at the end of the day and where we'd really dive into that. And I think those kinda changed per the team. And I
Sure.
think
Yeah,
that the
absolutely.
team, depend on the personality of the team and kind of where we were. And if it's guys that are coming back into a 2, 3 years returning starters, that we need a new message or we need to just kind of spin it a new way. Um, but I just think that, be who you say you are, and being accountable to yourself, being accountable to your teammates, and being honest with your communication, I think are things that we talked about all the time,
Yeah,
and at the end of the day, we always said, be just challenge them with being the best version of themselves all the
yeah,
time. And I think that,
yeah,
those three things building into that have a lot to do with that. If we can, and they're gonna serve you well throughout life, not just in football.
yeah. And I wanna lean into communication because that was something that, I was huge on and still am. I've always been a communicator. Sometimes I've been accused of being an over communicator. Um,
I think
but
I
it's yeah, it's so essential, right? And not knocking, the generations or anything like that, but that's one of those things that is starting to become lost, within society as a whole, is the ability to communicate effectively and understand why communication is so important. And
right.
so my question for you is, the importance of communication. And what kind of conversations would you have with your kids year after year about why it's so essential to be able to communicate?
Right, and there's so many levels of that communication, but you really gotta take the emotion out of the communication. When we're and there's so many levels of communication, meaning, okay, we're communicating our game plan to you, right? And how are we gonna communicate that in the most effective way? We're gonna communicate what we're gonna do in practice today. We do this, or we're gonna communicate our rules, or we're gonna communicate, uh, during practice when we're coaching your individual technique. And I think that's what I was talking to a lot about, the emotional and the feeling to like taking it personal. Like, we're not coaching you. This has nothing to do with you as a person and everything to do with you as a football player. We're talking about
Right.
stepping with the correct foot. We're talking about proper hand placement. Eyes should be here. And we need to be able to communicate that effectively with each other. And so we can't take that personal when coach is coming at me or coach is talking to me in the film room. I think that I've seen a lot with the communication now in that direction. Some of that stuff gets taken personal, and
Yeah.
that's not good. And so we really, before it gets to that point, we just got to be able to talk to each other. We've got to be able to communicate in the huddle. We've got to be able to communicate effectively during practice. And how much can we simulate the game in practice from a communication standpoint, whether that play's coming from upstairs, that play's coming from the sideline. All week long, we tell the coach is sitting here telling the quarterback to play, and now we get in the game and we're running a play in with a kid. Well, if you're going to run
Yeah.
the play in with the kid, why don't we run the play in with the kid during practice?
Right.
Right. And
Right.
so, finding ways from a schematical standpoint to practice your communication, I thought is critically important to your practice plan and to ultimately your game plan. How are we going to communicate these things during the game? How are we going to communicate this concept during the game? And if all we're doing is watching that huddle film on the sideline, we need to be able to. The first time we do that, maybe should not be the first game that we play. Like, should we at least, maybe we don't watch the sitting right there on the sideline watching the huddle, but maybe you should. Maybe we
Yeah.
should run a drill where we go over here and we run inside run, and then all of a sudden we go over here to get some water and we practice sitting where we're going to sit and we're going to watch the film. How we're going to do it in the game. And then you have all these great ideas when you're no longer the head coach, but kind
Oh,
of
I
getting
know.
kind of getting off topic with that. But if the communication from top down is critically important. Head coach must communicate with the coordinators and the position coach. There should be no miscommunication there, so that the message is clearly getting relayed to the kids, and there's no confusion. When there's confusion, then you get hesitation, then you get
Right.
problems arise.
Did you find that the more effective you communicated with your assistants and they communicated with their players, did you find that their effective communication really transferred to the athletes being able to communicate better outside of football as well?
Wow, that's we would make into that a point of emphasis, um, uh, helping them communicate And at the end of practice, or we talk about this all the time. We're developing the whole kid. We're not
Yeah.
just coaching football, right? You're coaching some life in there too. And being able to give them examples. I would say it all the time. Communication is the key to football and life. I would tell kids all the time, it's the key to football and life. I tell my PE kids that during PE volleyball. Hey, communication is the key to volleyball and life. But there's a lot of truth there. And
There's a
so
absolute truth. Yeah.
teaching these kids, during when it comes to homecoming, okay, we're going to ask someone to homecoming. We're not going to text them. We're going to have a conversation. Okay. We need to talk to a teacher about a grade. What's the appropriate way to do that? You want to talk to your mom and dad about something. What's the appropriate way to have that communication? And how are you prepared for those communication exit interviews with your coach at the end of the season? Make sure you guys are educated and you're ready to go in there and have a communication, a conversation that's not personal, that's all about the personal growth and development of you individually and this team overall. And so just hard conversations aren't easy and a lot of people run from them. And so
Yeah.
being able to have those, being able to practice those with kids is important.
Yeah. Well, listen, we could go on and on and on and on.
Uh-huh.
I'm gonna have you back on so we can really dive into some other stuff at some point. So this has been great. I mean, the perspective coming from how you got into it, the importance of just life and football, um, and mentorship and communicate. I mean, this is something someone's going to listen to, and again, my goal for each one is someone just take everybody just take one thing, and you've
Right.
definitely done that, and I greatly appreciate you, coach, and
I appreciate you
thank you.
having me on,
Yeah,
thinking
thank
of
you
me.
very much. Yeah, of course. I actually thought about you when I first started it, and I just things got swamped, and anyway,
That's awesome though,
so,
man.
yeah.
It's pretty
Um,
crazy.
well, we'll talk more about what's going on and get you back on here at some point and, dive into it, so just keep kicking butt, okay?
Let's follow up
Take
on that nonprofit.
Yeah, we will. Take care of those, all the girls in your house.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. We got
Yeah,
tonight we got rehearsal. They got a play coming
good,
up. So we got
good,
rehearsal
good.
tonight.
Well, enjoy. Hey, hang on just a quick sec, okay?
We'll do.
Thanks, Zach.
All right.